Hi, my name is Jerry Streets. I'm the senior pastor of the Dixwell Avenue Congregational United Church of Christ in New Haven, Connecticut. We are celebrating Black History Month, but we at Dixwell actually observe this in our own way year-round. It is my pleasure to introduce to you members of our congregation who, in their own right, are history makers. And so today, I welcome for our conversation Mrs. Alexis Highsmith-Smith. And so welcome, Alexis.
Thank you for having me. It's good to
be here. Thank you. It's a pleasure to see you, and I'm sure our audience will enjoy your sharing a little bit about yourself and your journey. So tell us, where'd you grow up, and something about your background in high school and college? I know we're going to talk a little bit about sports too, because you're very much a sports enthusiast as well.
I am. So I was born right here in New Haven, Connecticut, right at Yale New Haven Hospital. I grew up in New Haven and Hamden. We lived in New Haven, I think, until I was about 8 or 9 years old, and then moved to Hamden. So I spent majority of my childhood in Hamden. I had the real pleasure and privilege of attending St. Thomas's Day School for elementary school. And then I went to Hamden Hall for 7th grade through 12th grade. After graduating from Hamden Hall, I went to Duke in North Carolina for my undergraduate degree, and then got a law degree from the University of Wisconsin, Madison. So growing up, as you mentioned, I was really into playing sports. I had the opportunity to do a lot of different kinds of extracurriculars, and but sports was my love, particularly soccer. And I was really, really privileged to be able to play that in college.
What other sports I know you're involved in that you even to this day?
Yeah, so one way after you get to a certain age, you realize you can't play the sport that you really love anymore. And so that happened for me a few years ago. But you find ways to stay connected to the sport. And so I actually coached my oldest son for a year last year playing soccer. And then I referee soccer and basketball. And so that allowed me to participate in the sport in a different way, but stay connected to it. And then I started long distance running a few years ago as well. And so I've done 2 marathons and I think 12 half marathons. So that's what I like to do.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. As a quick aside, March Madness is on the way. You got any predictions?
Well, it's funny because I've been a Duke basketball fan, since I was a kid, and still am. And this is Coach K's last season, and so I'm hoping that he can go out with a national championship. So I have to always favor Duke. There's some great teams this year, but I have to favor Duke. So,
what do you think about the recent decision for pay equity amongst women soccer players?
Yeah, so that was a pretty phenomenal decision that came down yesterday, I think, which was Tuesday. I think one thing that we have seen for many years is a lack of pay equity across the board in all industries between women and men, particularly for women of color. I think Black women are vastly underpaid in many industries. And so this decision, I think, will kind of set the tone and hopefully be a precedent for, cases to come. I think, I followed that case really closely, I think in part because it was so infuriating. If you're a soccer fan, how successful the women's team has been for many, many years, right? And so to know that they were not paid on par with their counterpart men's team that is not as successful, has not achieved, really many kind of big championships as the women have. So I think it's a testament to, all the players that came before this team and who, had to fight for many years. So I think it's a groundbreaking decision.
Mm-hmm. Well, your insight about that as a person, as a sports enthusiast, and also as a lawyer, it's very important. Could you tell us a little bit about how it is that you decided to go into law? Was this always a childhood ambition, or did it emerge later in college, or how did that happen?
Yeah, I think I wanted to be a lawyer for a long time. I think since I was a kid, and had always thought about it. I think what changed for me over time is the career that I'm in now, and the particular field that I'm in now. So I am at New Haven Legal Assistance, and we are an organization that provides free legal assistance to people who can't afford a lawyer, or who can't access a lawyer. And I don't think it was until law school that I realized that this was the kind of work that I wanted to do. And part of it, as a quick story, my second year in law school, I was working at a small law firm, and they did civil rights and personal injury work. And one of the things that I had to do as a law student was do intake. So people would call and they would ask for a lawyer. They would tell their story about what happened and why they thought they needed a lawyer. And my job was to summarize the facts of what someone had told me and the story that they told me, and then give it to the attorneys in the office, and they would make a decision about whether or not to take the case. And there were so many cases that the lawyers decided not to take for various reasons. And I found myself really frustrated because these were people that I had to, hear their story, and they were so desperate, and people who were victims of police violence, or people who had been in a car accident through no fault of their own and had extensive medical bills and couldn't afford the medical bills for different reasons, or people who had been abused by a spouse or a partner and then lost their job because they couldn't go to work, things like that. And so it made me think about all the people who have these desperate situations who can't get an attorney to represent them. And so that's why legal aid kind of came into being for me, or how it came into being. It's a place where we try to fill that gap. We try to fill the place for when people know they need representation and they can't access the justice system because of income or money. And we try to fill that, and we try to provide that service for people.
Mm-hmm. Well, your role there at the Legal Aid Society, is that the proper name?
New Haven Legal Assistance.
New Haven Legal Assistance, sorry, is not just as a competent staff lawyer. You have a larger role, right?
I do. I'm the executive director of the organization.
Are you the first woman to direct the organization?
I'm not the first woman. I am the first Black woman, Black person to run the organization. So that's a real honor for me. I feel that weight. It's, I think also, legal aid is not unlike, I think, many systems and many nonprofits, right? The majority of our clients are people of color, mostly Black people. Yet it took us until 2017 to have its first person of color direct the organization, right? And so I think for me, I understand that power, and I understand and hold that as a real honor and understanding about the importance of that.
Is this an area of law that you imagine practicing for quite some time, or is there a larger vision? Not that you have to commit to anything, and I don't want your staff to get angry.
I know, who's watching, right?
But I often ask lawyers, do you think you might want to be on the Supreme Court someday, or whatever it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, one thing that we have started to have a lot of deeper conversations about in our office is, we do a really good job, I think, of addressing people's immediate direct needs. So someone comes to us and they've received a notice from their landlord that they're going to be evicted. Or someone comes to us and says that my employer is mistreating me in the following way, or has terminated me because of this, and I have a reason why I did X, Y, and Z. And so we handle those cases. I think where we have fallen a bit short is kind of addressing the upstream of the problem, right? And so I think for me, whether it's here or whether it's somewhere else, really starting to focus in on abolishing some of the systems, dismantling some of the systems that have this trickle-down effect that impact our clients and our communities in ways that perpetuate things like poverty, that perpetuate things like a lack of access to wealth, access to good healthcare, access to really solid quality educational opportunities. So I think that's where my future is, to really find spaces and places where that's the work, and how I can contribute in that kind of way.
I always struggle with having a balance with the question I'm going to ask you now. Is as of course, as a human being, as a woman, a person of color, are there particular insights that you would want to share about that journey, about your work, particularly to other women who will be watching this interview? And the reason why I prefaced the balance question because it's not all about either one of those dimensions. It's a combination of things, and sometimes we have to think about things that other people of other ethnic communities don't have to think about. So, any insights there you'd like to share?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, one thing that helped me a lot is knowing that being a lawyer was attainable. I think the educational background that I had, significantly helped. But I think for me, even bigger, was seeing people who looked like me in church who were doing the work that I wanted to do, right? Or in other spaces in the community, right? So other organizations that my parents may have been a part of, or things like that. And so I think the representation was really critical. I think as I went through my journey to become a lawyer, and even as an early lawyer, there are things that are huge sources of frustration, right? That you have to kind of figure out how to manage and deal with, right? So there has been more than one occasion when I was practicing more than I do now, where, you go to court and you're walking through the front door and you're walking through security and you're assumed to be anybody but a lawyer, right? And so you're told to go in the non-lawyer line, right? Or you're asked, what's the business that you have, or what do you know where your case is? And so I think things like that, being mistaken for not being, you're not supposed to be at the table. You're not supposed to be in a particular space. And so knowing how to deal with things like that. And I think, I relied heavily on, people that I had met through the George Crawford Black Bar Association, other spaces where there were Black women attorneys where we could lean on each other. So I think having those kinds of networks and having those kinds of supports are really important. And I face that now in kind of a different context, right? There's a lot of places that I'm, invited to, tables that I sit at just by the nature of being the executive director of New Haven Legal Assistance. And so once you're invited there, once you have a space at that table, how do you assert yourself in a way that shows that you in fact do belong there? How do you kind of balance the hesitation that some people may have to, further invite you to things or further engage in? So those are all things that I think about.
And to distinguish what is another person's issue or problem from it being your issue or problem.
Right. Exactly. Like, this is your journey that that you're managing.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, what are some of your other involvements in the community, humanitarian work that attracts your attention?
Yeah. So, one thing that I have found a lot of value in is being members of different nonprofit boards of directors. So right now I sit on the New Alliance Foundation, which is a local philanthropic organization that provides funding to different nonprofits in the New Haven area, and also in the Hartford area, in the eastern part of the state. I'm on the board of Horizons at Foot, which is an organization that provides summer academic and enrichment programming to students in the New Haven public schools each summer. And the enrichment can range from swimming mostly, but the organization also tries to encourage students to participate in golf and field hockey and things like that. And most of the students are students of color. I am also on the board of LEAP, which is really kind of exciting because LEAP is in a transition and now has a presence at the Q House, which is, of course, right next to the church. So that's really, really exciting as well. So those are the kind of the primary boards that I'm on right now.
So you're practicing, you're executive director of an organization, a legal organization. You're involved in the community in ways that you just described. You're also a spouse and a mom, and you run marathons. So I guess sleep is just not a part of your DNA.
Sleep is not. I aspire to sleep. I've read tons and tons of studies about the importance of sleep, and I just can't commit myself.
It's like, sleep. I've heard that. I've heard that idea. Right. Tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah. So, grew up in this area. I always kind of like to tell that I've got two parts of my life in terms of family. I have my North Carolina roots that I'm really proud of. Both my parents are from the Eastern North Carolina area, and ended up in Connecticut. I think like many Black families did, right? Job opportunities here. My dad's uncles worked in New Haven, some at the Winchester plant when it was in existence, and doing other things. And so my parents ended up here, but I'm very closely aligned and tied to that North Carolina history, part of my family. And so I have one sister who actually did the reverse migration thing, and now lives outside of Charlotte with her husband and 3 girls. So I have 3 nieces, which is a lot of fun. And then I'm married, and we have three children. Carlton is our oldest. He is 9. My middle is Deborah. She's 7. And then my youngest, Caden, is 6. So 2 boys and a girl. So it's very, there's a lot of energy in the house. The kids really like to have fun. They have fun with each other. They sometimes fight, but they really enjoy being able to play together.
Is your spouse a sports enthusiast like you?
He is, which was great because I'm a big sports fan. He's much bigger sports fan than me. He can tell you statistics and all of that stuff. He does the fantasy football and basketball and all of that. And then he actually, for a sports fan, your dream job is to work at ESPN, which he does. And so he's an ESPN employee, and so gets to be around sports.
But he's not doing any marathons, though.
No, he's not.
Okay.
He's not. He doesn't. He's not the runner. He likes to work out a lot, and does the gym thing and the lifting thing. But
What do you hope will be a part of your legacy to your children and hopefully maybe one day even grandchildren?
Yeah, I mean, I want my children to really understand that they are, they have the potential to be a change maker, right? I think the only way that you understand that is understand the world around you, right? And so have a sense of what's happening in your community and recognizing that you're a part of a community. Mm-hmm. So we encourage them to be kind. We encourage them to be curious. We encourage them to be respectful so that people want to engage with them, and that they can be in spaces, can be in places that, you know, allow them to be who they are, but also be part of a larger, you know, movement, you know, whatever that is. And we're really fortunate that, you know, the school they attend, that is one of the values. One of the values is understanding community. One of the values is understanding, you know, that there's a world around you that you can impact, and that you can change.
Mm-hmm. If you could whisper into the ear of Black America, what would that message be?
And
maybe to all America, but particularly given our experiences as people of color.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a patience, I think, that I would say that we need to have, but there's also an urgency that we need to have. I think there is a huge opportunity now. You know, I think we've all experienced since the pandemic started, and with all of the situations of police violence in 2020, there's a moment in time, I think, where, you know, many white Americans are coming to a reckoning, right? And so I think there is a sense that it's too little, too late, and I've definitely felt that. But I also think there's an opportunity for us to really seize this moment and keep pushing and recognize that, you know, this may not come again. We may not have this opportunity to implement, you know, change in the way that we really want to, right? Or that we really need to. And so I think this is kind of a, you know, whether this is we're in another civil rights movement, I don't know. But I think we have to not let people who, you know, have the power to make decisions, not let them lose sight that this moment is here right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, my last question, and I can ask you at least 50 more, but just one more. What sustains and gives you hope? What sustains you in all that you invested in?
I mean, I think, you know, when you have children, that really changes your perspective on hope. And so, I mean, most of the things that I do, I'm always have them in mind, right? What is the, you know, the impact of things that we're deciding now? What's the impact that's going to have, you know, on them? And so I think knowing that is a huge driver. I mean, I think another thing that also gives me lots of hope is kind of knowing, like, the history and the trajectory of things, right? I mean, we talk about change and we talk about urgency and wanting to move things quickly. But when you look at, you know, say the history of, you know, many of the laws that were passed in the civil rights movement, and, you know, just before that, right? Like, you know, stages of Jim Crow, Black codes, all of that. You know, we're now in a moment where there's been less time of, like, not having those things in place than not, right? And so I think recognizing what that history was and recognizing that, you know, we do have a long ways to come, but, you know, there's still time to do it if we really come together. I mean, that gives me a sense of hope as well.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything else you'd like to say that's come to mind as we've talked?
No, I mean, I think it's really important to tell, these stories, and I appreciate this opportunity. We do have so many phenomenal people, within our church community. And so, hearing from everyone has really been a pleasure, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Well, no, we thank you. Your inspiration and a blessing. So thank you again for this time. Mrs. Alexis Highsmith-Smith, attorney, athlete, coach, mom, change maker. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Jerry Streets. I'm the senior pastor of the Dixwell Avenue Congregational United Church of Christ in New Haven, Connecticut. Dixwell Church is the oldest congregational church founded in New Haven in 1820. As you know, we have been celebrating Black History Month throughout our nation. It is something that we in the Black community really observe and celebrate every day by the lives we live. It's my pleasure to share with you some of the profiles of members of the Dixwell Church who are in their own right history makers. So joining the conversation today is Judge Clifton Graves, Jr., who will talk a little bit about himself and his work. We're proud that he is a part of the Dixwell Church and doing the kinds of things that he will tell us about. Welcome, Judge Graves.
Thank you, Reverend Streets, and thank you. I'm humbled and honored that I was asked to be a part of this project, this Black History Project.
Thank you for being willing to do it. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school.
Yes, sir. Well, I feel my life is almost like a Spike Lee movie. I was born in Oklahoma, Guthrie, Oklahoma. Hold on, I think I lost you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there you are. Yeah.
Which is, and because my mother's a native of Oklahoma, McAllister, and she was in school at Langston. Actually, I graduated from Langston, and they married my father, who actually had ventured out from North Carolina to work at Langston. They got married, and then I was born on Christmas Eve in 1952. We stayed on the campus. Actually, and our neighbors, by the way, and I get back to this later, were Reverend Edmonds and his wife May, and his 4 daughters. They were our neighbors there on the campus. And so our relationship goes back many years. So after staying in Oklahoma for a couple of years, my father decided to come back to North Carolina, to Winston-Salem, his hometown, and where I spent most of my childhood until I was 14. And then we relocated here to New Haven.
When did you come to New Haven, your family?
We came in 1969, the year after Dr. King was assassinated. We had, as I mentioned before, Reverend Edmonds, the Edmonds family and my family have been close for many years. And actually, they actually followed each other around the country. My father had met, when he was still single, met Reverend and Ms. Edmonds while they were both at Delaware State, historically Black Delaware State in Dover, Delaware. Dr. Edmonds then got a job at Langston College in Oklahoma. My father followed him out there and got a job on the campus. And then after a few years, Reverend Edmonds got a job at Bennett College in North Carolina in Greensboro. And then after that, my father decided he would go back to North Carolina as well, and Winston-Salem, which is about, as far as here from New Haven to Bridgeport, Greensboro, and Winston-Salem. So we were in close proximity and a strong friendship with the Edmonds family. So Doc Edmonds, after, as you know the story, Doc Edmonds was very active in the civil rights movement in Greensboro, was president of the local NAACP, was instrumental in bringing Dr. King to Bennett College where he taught. And because of his activism, he was threatened on many occasions and actually had the Ku Klux Klan burn a cross, as you know, in front of his yard, which prompted him, out of concern for safety of his family, to take the job when offered to come to New Haven to work, to be pastor of Dixwell Avenue United Church of Christ. And so several years later, my father, and in consultation with Reverend Edmonds, decided to take a job here in New Haven with the Dixwell, with the church. The church at that point had a series of social service and economic development initiatives, one of which was the Dixwell Housing Corporation, which was designed to purchase, dilapidated homes, rehabilitate them, and rent them out to low-income folk in New Haven. That was a church initiative. And Dr. Edmonds knew my father's background in real estate and et cetera. So he actually asked him to come up and actually run that program for the church. And that's how we got.
I see. So about how old were you when your family relocated to New Haven?
I was 14.
Wow. So from 14 forward, you grew up in New Haven.
Yes, sir. But it was my if I could, just a moment. The North Carolina experience is one I just spent a moment on. We were, I was very fortunate and blessed that in my life I had the chance to know and love both sets of grandparents. My paternal grandparents, Ed and Ada Gray, my father's parents, as well as my mother's, Oscar and Reba Factory. And I learned a lot from both sets of grandparents, although between the four of them, they didn't have more than sixth grade formal education, but they had a whole lot, as you know, a lot of wisdom and a lot of just common sense. And they passed as much of that on to me as they could that I would listen to. But I was certainly grateful and blessed to have them in my life. And my grandfather, my father's father in particular, was very instrumental and a role model for me in many ways. But growing up in North Carolina was, I think, laid the foundation for me. Both parents were graduates of black colleges. My father in Hampton, my mother in Langston in Oklahoma, and it still, both of them instilled in me at an early age the importance of education and the importance of striving to be the best you could be. And growing up in Winston-Salem, and I remember both Estelle Simpson and Carlton Highsmith spoke about this in their bios, presentations, that growing up in Winston-Salem, either it was a segregated South, and I distinctly remember Reverend Streets drinking from the colored water fountain, going to the colored restroom, eating in the colored section of the restaurant, sitting in the colored section of the movie theaters. All that was part of my early childhood, and I understood that. But even with that, what was instilled in us by my grandparents and my parents is that no one's better than you. Strive to be the best you can be. And that was reinforced by the fact that in our community, my optometrist, my eye doctor was African-American, my dentist was African-American, my general practitioner was African-American, the cleaners we went to owned by African-Americans, the credit union my father put his money in was run by African-Americans. So we had all that, and the insurance man was African-American. So everybody that we knew, the plumber, the electrician, anyone that had anything to do with our lives would look like us. So the positive reinforcement that instilled at an early age was that, you don't need to be anyone else. You can strive to be the best you can be, and you can achieve and be successful. So those early years in Winston-Salem reinforced a sense of pride and self-reliance and self-assurance that my parents reinforced, and it helped me tremendously when we relocated to Connecticut.
So from 14 forward, you were in New Haven. So after having such a rich experience as you just described, what was it like continuing to live in New Haven from age 14? Well,
here's the thing. The funny thing about that is, I got to add this quickly. My sister and I attended an all-black Catholic school in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So it was a small school, of course. All black, it was all African-American students, all white non-teachers from New Jersey and New York and Pennsylvania. And so my father, it was clear, the understanding was that was one of the best schools that black children could attend. And it was a sacrifice for us to attend that school. But my father and mother were absolutely adamant about us attending that school and doing the best we could do and be the best we could be. And so that experience was very helpful. And of course, for me, I had friendships there and relationships, from kindergarten through 8th grade. And so my father came to us as I was in my 9th grade year, and wants to say and said, we're going to relocate to Connecticut. I have to tell you, you can appreciate this as a therapist. It was traumatic for me. It was traumatic, sure. Because that my whole life it centered around being in Winston-Salem. You know, I was a Little League baseball player. A team that won the championship, the city championship. I was captain of the basketball team. We won the state Catholic championship. And I was looking forward to my boys of going to high school and just living our lives. And then my father comes with this devastating news that we had to move to Connecticut. I didn't even know what Connecticut was. I had to look it up on the map. So I guess it's near New York somewhere. But in any event, it was tough for me. And so then to transition and to segue into coming to Connecticut, in addition to leaving my friends and family and grandparents, quite frankly, and coming to this new place where I knew anybody except the Edmonds family. That's all the only people that I knew. Then my father says, well, we're going to send you to prep school. You're not even going to go to school in New Haven. I had to come up here and take a test and got admitted to the Gunnery prep school in Washington, Connecticut, which is about 50 miles from here in New Haven. And that just added to my trauma, because here I am now, moving to a new environment, new city, didn't know anyone, being separated from my parents now and going to a boarding school in the woods of Connecticut. So that first year that was very difficult for me in terms of the transition, but I understood, and I got to tell you, I had some issues with my dad for putting me in that school for a while, but I also understood that he did it out of love and concern and trying to do the best for me. He wanted the best for me. And so it took a while to adapt, but the only connection that I really had to New Haven for those 3 years I was in prep school was through the church. I didn't have any real friends out because I had no connections. I didn't go to school here in New Haven. So everyone that I knew was actually, in terms of my age, young men in particular, were through the church. So Earl Vaughn, the Cole family, Mrs. Cole and her 3 boys, and Otis Johnson, they were my friends, but they were through the church connection here at Dixwell. So Dixwell was a foundation for me in terms of friendships and relationships most of my first few years in Connecticut.
So after Gunnery, it was called Gunnery, the prep school was called Gunnery?
Yeah, actually, and by the way, you would think people think it's a military school, but in fact, it was named for a man named Frederick Gunn, who, by the way, you can appreciate this, was an abolitionist. He was an abolitionist back in 1800s, and so now it changes the name of the school now to Mr. Gunn School for that very reason. But anyway, so I'm at the Gunnery, and it was an educational and enlightening experience for me, because for the first time growing up in the South, all you know really is black and white. Particularly the time that I grew up, just black and white. And the first time I ever went to school with a white student was in my 9th grade year in Winston-Salem before we left. So I had some experience, just that 1 year experience. So we get to Connecticut, and of course the school is predominantly white. And but in addition to that, what was transformative for me was that I got a chance to, for the first time in my life, to sit down with someone who identified themselves as being Italian or Irish or Jewish. Because I didn't know any difference. We're just black and white in North Carolina. But in Connecticut, the ethnicities, the ethnic identities are more pronounced. And I got a chance to hear the stories of the struggles of the Irish and the struggles of the Italians and the struggles of the Jewish community, and that history, and have sensitized me in terms of a larger worldview of oppression and discrimination. And so that was very helpful and informative. But also, you should know this just quickly. What I also learned, and you can appreciate this as well, that because the class when I entered the Gunnery, we had the largest class of AfricanAmerican students, 13 out of 225 in the school, small school, but 13 students of African descent, and most were from the South. So we all had similar experiences, but also a few from Cleveland and in your city of Chicago and Detroit, and so. When we get there, it was again 1969, 70. After Dr. King's assassinated, a lot of, as you know, protests and turmoil around the country on African-American identity and Black power, and of course the anti-war movement. So we organized a group of Black students. We formally organized ourselves, and as a result of our organizing, we started getting hate mail and hate letters in our mailboxes, caricatures of Black people being lynched on ropes. And this is a prep school with upper class white boys from the best of American families. And we getting these. And so it was a shock to all of us, especially those of us from the South, because we were growing up thinking that it was just the Ku Klux Klan and White Citizens Council folk down South who were the racists in this country, who had racial animosity toward us. And it was a rude awakening for me and an eye opener for me to get these letters.
What happened after you graduated from the Gunnery?
So after we graduated from the Gunnery, so after learning that experience, of course, it was enlightening. So I'd heard about this school, Tufts University in Massachusetts. Guy Cole actually also grew up in Dixwell Church. His mother, Mrs. Cole, was, as you may remember, Mrs. Cole was very active in our church. And Guy, her oldest son, was at Tufts at the time. And he had convinced me that I should look at Tufts. And so I went up for a weekend and hung out with Guy and applied, and it was accepted. And decided to attend Tufts University because a guy was majoring in political science and wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to kind of follow in his footsteps. And he encouraged me that was a good place to go. So I enrolled at Tufts and spent 4 years there. And one of the better experiences of my life, being at Tufts during that period of time, we had a chance to be involved in the African-American Student Union. Was president of Black Student Union for 2 years and had a chance and an opportunity to spend a day with Muhammad Ali. He was invited to campus, and the president of the university called me and said, would I mind escorting Muhammad Ali around for the day? And of course, I was ecstatic and excited. And that was one of the great experiences of my life, to spend the day with Muhammad Ali.
Sure.
Because he was Ali. He was just Ali. And just talking trash the whole time. But it was a great experience just to be with him and to be in his presence. And
so where'd you go after Tufts?
After Tufts, after that experience at Tufts and learning experience there, I enrolled at Georgetown Law School. I wanted to go into law because, again, going back to my years, especially growing up in the South and seeing the injustices, witnessing the injustices that I experienced and that our people experienced, I thought going into law would be a good field to be a change agent and a difference maker. So Georgetown was one of several schools that I applied to, and I like Georgetown because it was in Washington, and because of the proximity to the courts and to Congress, I was convinced that it was a good place to attend law school. So went to Georgetown, and that was also a great experience there. Got a chance to meet lifelong friendships there and learned a lot, experienced a great deal in terms of the law. Got a chance to do an internship when Andrew Young was Secretary of State, because Georgetown had a foreign service program. So I was enrolled in both the law program and the School of Foreign Service, because I wasn't sure whether I wanted to practice law or become a diplomat at the time. So I was fluctuating back and forth. So that was a great experience working under Andrew Young's administration at the State Department. But I also got a chance to meet and engage with the Congress people and actually sit in on Supreme Court decisions to the Bakke case. Actually get a chance to sit in on that, as well as the death penalty cases. So it was a great experience for me to Georgetown. And Georgetown, after Georgetown, I decided I wasn't clear about which direction I wanted to take, but I opted to return to North Carolina. I got a job. My first job out of law school was working as a legal services lawyer back in my hometown of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And I worked there for a while. And then somehow someone approaching me about a job at the university there, Winston-Salem State, historically black, Winston-Salem State University. So I applied for that and took a job there, worked as an administrator and taught there at Winston-Salem State for years. Then Dr. Edmonds and my father tried to convince me that I needed to come back to Connecticut. So I passed the Connecticut bar and was able to get a job in the Corporation Counsel office for the city of New Haven. I was it was New Haven up to that point had actually contracted all this work out to different private lawyers. It was the first class of an actual city lawyers. I was fortunate enough to be a part of, and I stayed there for a few years. And then I just kind of bounced around. I worked there for a while. Then I worked at the Housing Authority for the city of New Haven. Then I went to Alabama for a while. Reverend Streets, worked at Alabama A&M University. I started another historical black college as an administrator. Then returned to New Haven again and worked as the Housing Authority again. And then They just bounce around a little bit.
Sure. But now, for our audience to know that you're serving as the judge of the probate court, and you're the first African American to serve in that capacity, I believe. So you can give us a context for that.
Well, excuse me. And I apologize for jumping all over the place. Yeah. But actually, in the context, actually is based on what I just said. The varied experiences that I'd had working as a college administrator in three different colleges, because I also worked at Southern as an administrator for about 11 years. The college experience, working as a city attorney for the city of New Haven, and working as a housing authority attorney, I think gave me. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think I lost you there. I'm sorry. When I was Judge Keys, John Keys, who had been to probate judge for 32 years. Prior to that, his father had been probate judge for 8 years. So there had been a Keys probate judge in New Haven almost 4 decades. So when he decided to retire, actually he approached me, and a few other folks approached me about at least considering running for judge. And I thought about it, and primarily it was based on the experiences that I'd had, because probate courts are really the people's court. You deal with people's problems, from wills and trusts to conservatorships, family matters, etc., children's issues. And it was felt, and I felt, and others felt that the broad experiences that I've had prepared me to serve in that capacity. So I pursued it, and I was very fortunate and blessed that I got the support certainly of our church and certainly folks in the community. And I ended up getting elected as the first African American probate judge. And it's a 4-year term, unlimited. I mean, you can continue to serve as long as you're elected. Well, actually, no. That's the way it works, because it's a state authorized position. This is my last term. This is my last year, in fact, because you have to actually retire at 70. So I turned 70, God willing, on Christmas Eve this year. And so I have to really retire on or by that date. And so I've served 5 years, because I ended up serving the last full year of Judge Keys' term. And then I had my own 4-year term. So when I complete this. So it's every 4 years up to your 70th birthday or until you're unelected. Yeah, exactly. Someone else I got you. All right. Yeah. So what would you hope would be part of your legacy? Well, I would say, and I think about this often. Some quickly I forgot. In my childhood, when I was 9 years old, I had an opportunity. I think I shared this with you, the church, many times. I was blessed with the opportunity to actually hear and meet Dr. King. My parents were in their foresight, took me to Golden Metropolitan AME Zion Church, Reverend Streets, to hear Reverend King, Dr. King speak. And all these years later, I reflect on. I don't remember everything he said, obviously, but I remember him saying to that audience, and I thought he was talking to me, that to strive to be the best you can be. If you can't be, the moon, be a star, but just try to be the best that you are. And I've carried that legacy carried that message throughout my life, and trying to just work hard and be the best. But really, it's my grandmother, my paternal grandmother's words that stick with me. And she said, boy, because grandmas can call you boy. She said, boy, there's just 2 things I just want you to do. Just try to live right and try to do right. Mm-hmm. Just live right and try to do right. She said, now, you won't always live right. You won't always do right. But try to do your best to live right and do right. So I've tried to live up to grandma's admonition and words. And yes, I've fallen short, because I'm human, like everybody else. But I carry those words with me, and I guess, Reverend Streets, I would carry that. I try to pass it on to my children and those that I encounter, my family, in terms of just do the best you can do, be the best you can be. And to my African American history students, I've been teaching at Gateway for over 20 years, African American history. I use these words often. I'm sure you use them. You've heard them in your life as well. The African American experience embodies these 2 words: the spirit of resistance and resilience. Resistance and resilience. And I've incorporated that into my own personal life, because I've had to bounce back from many challenges and setbacks, like many others. but generally speaking, for us as a people, that certainly captures who we are, who we've been. And no matter what setbacks we've experienced, we've always had it within ourselves and the God within us to bounce back. There had to be resilience to bounce back from whatever setbacks, whatever challenges this country, this society is put in front of us. And so I think that continues to be our legacy, resistance, resilience. And that's something I would certainly pass on. That's a lesson that I've tried to incorporate, as I said, in my life, and I pass on to others.
Well, I think that's a good note to say thank you again for sharing this time. Resistance and resilience, your life's path has been a blessing to many others, and I'm sure you will be doing exciting things even after the judgeship period ends. So we wish you well with that. Is there anything you'd like to add or say that's come to mind as we conclude?
I wanted to just say just two quick things. One, about just thank the church. You, Reverend Streets, certainly I have to give props to the late Reverend Dr. Edwin Edmonds and his wife, well called Aunt May, for being mentors and encouraging me throughout my entire life. And certainly members of the church. The church, through all, as I mentioned earlier, the church was my foundation and my source of strength in my early years and even throughout my entire life. The folks at the church have always been supportive and encouraging to me, and I want to just thank the Dixwell Church for being there for me all these years. And certainly on the personal level, I have to give props to my late mother and father, Clifton Sr. and my mother Mamie, my sisters, my siblings, my sister Catherine, sister Donna, my brother Eddie, my children Tammy and Malik, for all they have been and done for me over the years. And I'll be remiss if I didn't mention them and thank them for being a love source and support and inspiration to me. Well, thank you again. Thank you, sir. Thank you for this time. I'm humbled and honored and to serve and to be a part of this project. Thank you, Reverend Streets, and thank you, sir.